Hello, Elwood City Limits listeners. Welcome, because this is a very special day, hopefully in your life, but certainly in mine and in the history of the show. This is Will Young, one of your normal hosts here, and we are going to get into a little bit of a mailbag special. It's actually a little bit of a grab bag here, not just a mailbag, because we've got some emails to answer. I've got a big announcement, and we're going to be welcoming a recent guest back onto the show for a little bit of extra Arthur content. So this kind of fits into the ECL extra category. It fits into the mailbag show. I'm going to have a hard time naming this one. So welcome, everyone. I'm glad to have you here. This is a big, big thing, and I will tell you why at the Patreon announcement. So the main thing is that I wanted to start off with your emails because, of course, I'm sure you were expecting them to be answered on the most recent episode. But given the fact that we had a guest, and usually the guest episodes tend to run a little longer, I wanted to give you the attention that you deserve. And speaking of attention that is deserved, I want to give a lot of love to our patrons. And the reasons, of course, I think are obvious, but will also become a bit more obvious as this episode goes along. So, our patrons consist of Aaron DeFilippo and Alex, Caitlin Harrington and Shander Lefebvre Boughton, Christine Wong, Sierra S., Stan Mike Dawson Silva, Emily K. and Froppy, Ian Collis, Jake Bailey, Joe Sue, John DuLong, John Griswold, Kat, Kaylin Krogall, Kevin Noon, Kristen, Leanne S., Light Relentless, Macy Ball, Marlo Stanfield, Michaela Gibson, Pretty Cool Stairs, Rachel Pearson, Riley Stevens, Shayna Bennett, Stella, Teresa, and William. Thank you, one and all. Love you. Love you, love you, love you. And even if you're not a patron, love you too. I'm glad that you're here. So, we are going to head over to elwoodcitylimits@gmail.com. And we're going to see what has been awaiting us and what you have been waiting for. All right, let's open this first email. It is from Kelsey, who says, the email is titled Arthur and Mental Health. I think it might have been last week or the week before, probably a lot longer. There was an email asking if Arthur would do more episodes on mental health. They lightly talked about the possibility of Ratburn being depressed in one episode, so I don't know if they would go back to that subject or not. I do think that they would be open to discuss depression with kids. I feel like discussing ADHD would be harder to talk about without the possibility of stereotyping, in my personal opinion, but I would love to see ADHD and depression represented. I feel like after the Mr. Ratburn and the Special Someone episode, they have more free will to do these types of harder episodes. I also think that they could discuss in an episode about alcohol abuse, since they have mentioned that alcohol exists in their universe in a few episodes. There's a bit of a lighter note here, but let me talk about this first. Of course, I think that kids media has a really unique perspective in terms of tackling more sensitive issues, let's say, or issues with a lot more nuance. When you're presenting it to a child's audience, you have an opportunity to talk to them on a level as equals, and also from a place of respect, because I mean, at least when I was a kid, I respected the heck out of cartoons. So when they had something to say, I listened. Now, this doesn't always go great. I don't know if you've ever heard of Cartoon All-Stars to the Rescue, but it's when this kind of backfires a little bit. So you want to refrain from being too preachy. And sometimes when we're in the middle of a burgeoning cause, let's say, it can be easy to take a stance and then have that not age terribly well. So I always think that you should go into these types of episodes, this type of content with every side in mind, but you also need to pick I'm not really into the whole, centrism kind of thing. I feel like you need to come out and be in support, especially when we're talking about, let's say, depression or ADHD, or you can put that against, mental health in general, or if you're representing an underrepresented community. I think these days we need to be clear in children's media where we stand with kids, because there is room for nuance and subtlety in kids media, but there's also, we're dealing with developing brains here, so sometimes you have to be a little bit more direct So all this to say, I agree, Kelsey. I hope that they would do this more in the future. But of course, you have to have a bit of a light touch with it. Unfortunately, we can't do this for every single episode, or else it ends up being it can be a little bit depressing, a little bit preachy, a little bit more educational. And Arthur is also a fun show. So as long as they're able to keep that balance, I'm okay with it. On a lighter note, what type of music do you think Patrick Ratburn's husband Patrick Ratburn is interested in? For some reason, and I think maybe because he kind of looks like him, I see him listening to a lot of Hamilton, a lot of like Lin-Manuel Miranda, kind of like hip hop and kind of smooth, maybe R&B type of. I don't know. Also pop. He seems like a bit of a poppy guy as well. Thanks, Kelsey. We go now to Dylan, who says, "Dear Will and Lucas, I thought you might enjoy this little tidbit of my blog I just wrote." Dylan wanted to say that I did read your blog, and thank you very much. I don't know if you want me to share that. It gets a little bit personal, and I appreciate that, Dylan. I did read that, and I passed it along to Lucas as well, and I want to say thank you for doing that. This next one is from Ike. Hey guys, I wanted to give you a heads up about Season 9. This was the season I grew up watching, and I really like it. There are some really good things about this season, such as Lucas getting his wish of more Arthur episodes. Yes. I wanted that too, but yeah, Lucas was a lot more vocal than me. Episodes 3, 5, 6, and 7 are all Arthur-focused episodes, as well as Arthur showing up in most of the other ones. Some character duos we get to see this season are Arthur and Molly. Oh, okay. Great, cool. DW and Tommy. Brain and Francine, as well as George and Buster, which we've already seen. But it's not going to be them working with each other, more of George versus Buster. Buster in the episode Buster the Mythmaker will go full InfoWars. Okay, here we go. That's going to be, you guys, that's going to be a real good episode, I got a feeling. Unfortunately, we only get one real Binky episode, but it's going to leave a permanent change to the character. Oh, this is great. I love this, teasing the season ahead, because, again, I have no idea what's in store. So Emily will also be getting an episode this season, which I couldn't care less for. Well, so I'll have to see about that one. So have fun with this season. And just one last thing, the animal hierarchy will reach an all-time high in confusion in episode 4, so keep watch for that. It will be unforgettable. Ike, I'm going to leave this out there. I think we should have more previews of the season from you or anybody else. Now, so season 9, that's definitely whet my appetite. But for the seasons ahead, I think that's a good. Sounds like a good idea to me. We go now to Norbert, who wishes us a happy new year. I agree with you guys on Brain's voice. It's always bothered me how it seems that whenever a cartoon replaces a child voice actor, the replacement has a much higher voice. It was especially disappointing in Hey Arnold, the Jungle movie, where Arnold and Gerald's new voice actors have higher voices than the previous ones, despite the characters being 2 years older than in the original series, and there already being an episode all about Gerald starting puberty. I remember that one. On Moonlight Bay. Causing his voice to deepen. You have good instincts on Brain seeming older because, spoiler, a later episode reveals that Brain was held back a year in kindergarten and is the same age as Binky and Prunella. What? Whoa, brother. Speaking of previews of new episodes, that's wild. I think we just broke. He just broke me. Like man. Wow. I'm gonna have to think about that one. I can't wait. I can't wait till Lucas finds out. This is gonna be great. Thank you, Norbert, for giving me a lot to chew on. All right, our final two are a bit longer ones, which we do appreciate. That again, wanted to make sure that they got enough time and attention. This first one's from Matthew, April 9th, Theory and More. I think my last email was during Season 7, and I never let you guys know of a theory I have about the cause of the school fire in April 9th. I think Arthur's dad lied about the faulty wiring at the school as a cover-up for his cooking gone horribly wrong. You'll remember that the intro to the episode shows Mr. Reed in a rush because he forgot about the school catering job. His rushing around the school would be an easy way to start some kind of a fire accident while cooking. And it would explain why it took him so long to get out of the school while all the students were outside and Arthur was frantically looking for his dad. He was probably trying to extinguish the flames and maybe Mr. Morris was injured trying to help him. Thoughts? I think we got... Excuse me. Speaking of InfoWars, I think we got a little bit of a conspiracy theory here. I'm for it though. Like, hey, in terms of conspiracy theories, I'd rather they be in cartoons than in real life. Yeah, that's a really interesting take. I want to say that I think that we've seen Dad have kitchen mishaps before, but I don't know about like setting an entire kitchen on fire. So I'd like to think that he's telling the truth. But where there's smoke, there's fire, and you never know. It could have just been one of those things. Like you said, he was in a hurry, so maybe things just got out of hand. It's an interesting idea though. Continuing with the April 9th comments, I've always felt that this is one of the best episodes of Arthur. Every kid goes through fire drills at school, so the whole idea of school fires is instantly relatable and memorable for kids. It really works well as an ensemble episode, and like Arthur does time and time again, it pushes the boundaries of where a children's show can go and still be effective. When this episode aired, I would have been in 3rd grade, basically within the Arthur viewing demographic. I probably would have been, was that season 7? So I would have been closer to grade 6, I want to say. And Lucas, that would probably be right around your age there, Matthew, maybe grade 2 or 3. Even at that age, I didn't really put 2 and 2 together that this story was a metaphor for 9/11. But since it was one of the first double-length episodes, it was pretty easy to notice the importance of the episode right away. I didn't realize all the parallels to the events of 9/11 until I was older. As you mentioned on the show, it works well whether you understand the connection or not, which I believe is a huge strength of the episode, especially since it deals with such a heavy topic of traumatic experiences. By the way, okay, sorry, switching gears here a little bit. Do you remember watching Wishbone in the 90s? There was an episode where the kids went to an abandoned barn which caught fire while they were inside against their parents' permission. It was a pretty intense scene for a kids show, and I remember it really scared me when I was young. We never really see the fire in Arthur, so a true scare factor is missing, but still, it's an emotional and important episode. I did watch Wishbone. I don't have a lot of memories of it. I have more memories of reading the books that Wishbone would put out of like the television show and redoing. Like I had one that was like The Legend of Sleepy Hollow. So yeah, that's more what I remember than, and of course I remember the Wishbone intro very, very well. I could move on to my thoughts about Season 8, but honestly, I don't have much to say. It wasn't a very standout season. As someone who has seen every episode of the series multiple times, I can say that Season 8 is the beginning of a shift towards more weird stories, as it was mentioned in your recap episode, which isn't bad, but it's hard to tell where to draw the line with weird fantasy sequences. A simple down-to-earth Arthur episode is hard to come by in the next few seasons. I also agree with your thoughts about Postcards from Buster. The spinoff series never really appealed to me as a kid, though I still watched it daily after school. There are occasional scenes in Lakewood Elementary, and somewhere we see Arthur watching the videos from Buster, which helps bring the show back to its roots in Elwood City. Obviously, the show was never as successful as Arthur, but I'm sure having it set in the Arthur universe, to some degree, helped carry it along. Looking forward to listening to your discussions of Season 9. My local PBS just aired Castles in the Sky and Tipping the Scales this morning, so I was pleased to watch and listen to your latest episode discussing the same episode in the same day. And that's from Matthew, a.k.a. Pretty Cool Stairs, one of our newer patrons. Thanks, Matthew. And finally, we have an email from Rachel Pearson. Speaking of patrons, howdy, folks. Rachel's back. Multiple listeners have gotten on the subject of neurodivergent representation, as specifically suggesting that Buster is ADHD and wanting the show to explore that. I'm ADHD myself, and while I certainly see what they mean with Buster, I admit that at first I had very conflicted feelings on the idea. ADHD, like autism, is a spectrum. There are 3 recognized variations. Type 1, predominantly inattentive, formerly known as ADD. Type 2, predominantly hyperactive and impulsive. Type 3, combination of the two. All forms of ADHD are largely misunderstood, and I would never want to put down anyone's headcanons that make them feel represented. Yet at the same time, quite a bit of fictional ADHD representation is the quote-unquote weird friend, a hyperactive, not terribly intellectual prepubescent boy with poor grades and unusual mannerisms, mostly treated as a joke. Think Sheen from Jimmy Neutron. Being primarily inattentive type, I really didn't identify much with that archetype as a child, and I worry that it can enforce some stereotypes. However, I re-examined my stance when I rewatched Season 2's Buster Hits the Books. Even if Buster fits the stereotype on a basic level, Arthur still added far more nuance than I was giving the show credit for. The episode is essentially about the characters mistaking symptoms for a lack of intelligence, which, yeah, I can relate to. When I was in the 2nd grade, I did poorly on the school's reading exam because the book was significantly below my reading level and I was too bored to retain it. My teacher, who was kind of awful for a number of reasons, apparently insisted to my parents that I could not read, kept me in the lowest level reading groups, and suggested me for basic classes the next year. Luckily, my parents were on the ball. They read with me often and knew how much I read independently, but I wonder how my life would have been different if that hadn't been. It's so important that this episode showed children with any sort of learning difficulty that their struggles do not make them dumb, no matter what other people assume, and that there can be more to poor performance than a lack of ability. I took a teaching class in college where Calvin from Calvin and Hobbes was used to illustrate smart kids with learning differences, and I think this episode would be similarly valuable. Still, I would also love a portrayal of an ADHD child that strays further from society's general image of the condition, maybe one who sits quietly with their mind wandering rather than display physical symptoms, struggles with anxiety and intense emotional states, and manages to get good grades by the skin of their teeth using a myriad of coping mechanisms, healthy or otherwise. That was a really interesting email, and Rachel, I think, is a little bit self-conscious about the length of them, but so far have found them very informative, and I hope that you, listener, have as well. The only thing that I will say to that, because I think Rachel's made quite a few good points, is that I hope that with Arthur and with other children's shows that are being made now, there's more of an attempt to represent the fact that children learn differently, which is not something that I feel was represented very well when I was young. And it's sort of something I'm still wrapping my head around right now, but I think it's just the fact that there are different ways that people learn. And it's as different as you and I are. You might find one way better and me differently. I spent a lot of my time in school from elementary or grade school to high school, figuring out what worked for me and what didn't, and why just straight up studying has never been very good for me. I need a very specific type of fact learning and interaction with course material and stuff like that in order for me to retain it, and why just memorizing it didn't help. And I feel like a lot of times, and this is easy for me to say because I'm not a teacher or an administrator, there seems to be a lot of focus on outcomes rather than actual learning. So trying to fit essentially square pegs into round holes, trying to fit kids who learn differently into just this one simple mold. And I mean, people will tell you about the underfunded school systems in various countries and how, I wish that it could be as utopian as having every child learn their own way. But yeah, I found that email very interesting, and I would like to see more educational diversity. I'm all for diversity in children's media, maybe educational diversity to represent the kids who just learn differently from the rest of us, but are just as smart, if not more intelligent. And that's all our emails. If you want an email read on the show, send it over to elwoodcitylimits@gmail.com. Okay, so this is time for the big announcement. Now, the last time I had a big announcement concerning the Patreon, it was about the fact that we couldn't do the filibuster episodes anymore. In fact, we were scaling back episodes in general. And that was because between this and my day job and my other responsibilities, it was getting to be a bit much. And we did see a bit of a drop-off in patrons, which I don't begrudge any of you at all if you lowered your donation or if you bowed out altogether. That's totally fine. I completely understand. But things have changed, for me at least, because the job that I've had for the last 2 years, I quit. I left. Friday was my last day. Recording this on Monday the 27th, so the 24th was my last day. And the straight truth of it was making me very, very unhappy. It was a customer service job at a local parking company. So essentially, I was working at a parking lot downtown, and it was not very good for many reasons. Very good for me, I should say. And my mental health suffered as a result, as did the things that I really want to do, which is not related to parking. As a matter of fact, it happens to be this podcast and other things that I like to do. I'm trying to make a go of becoming a writer, more of a writer, and I want to be a more dedicated podcaster as well. So I apologize for kind of giving you the runaround here, but this has been just life changes, and I decided to make this change. It is one of the scariest things I've ever done because now I don't have a steady source of income. I still have a bit of don't worry, I'm not going to I'm not going to go hungry or anything, but now I really have to put my best foot forward. And so in talking about it with Lucas, we want to make more content for you and for the Patreon, because I'll tell you this. I've said this before. The Patreon money has been a big help in paying off the monthly fee that we have for hosting the podcast. Huge. That's basically the money that we have right now pays for the podcast and little else, because half of that goes to Lucas, half of it goes to me, and most of my half is taking care of the podcast hosting fees, which is fine. But now it's a different situation. Now I need to think about, unfortunately, how to make money. I really wish I didn't have to focus on that, but it is it's a new life that I'm trying to make. So in recognition of that, I thought, well, if we want to kind of make a good play at the Patreon, if we want to give you content that you would want to see, what do we do? So here's what we're doing. We did a poll for our patrons, and we've had most of them vote, and the choice was between 3 different topics for Lucas and I to do a second show, not related to Arthur, but kind of in the same wheelhouse. So the 3 choices were Canadian kids shows, which would be us talking about the shows that aired for us in Canada. Some of them you might have seen before if you live elsewhere, and others you might not know about at all. But there's a lot of strange ones out there, and there's a ton we can talk about with that. Saturday morning cartoons in general. Now, I'm a big fan, and I would recommend that you listen to What a Cartoon, which kind of talks about a similar thing. But in terms of sticking to Saturday morning cartoons, it's something a bit more general, and there's a lot that we can talk about there. I have a lot of feelings about cartoons I watched on a Saturday morning. Then there was a third option, which is the winner of our poll and will be the subject of the show going forward. This will be a Patreon exclusive show. We're still going to keep the every 2 weeks release date for Elwood City Limits. But in the in-between weeks, we're going to be doing, hopefully, like a somewhat shorter show, but we're still going to have content. It's going to be the same sort of thing. We're going to talk about a television show and review an episode. And this one is going to be PBS Kids shows. We're going to be taking a look at the shows that aired on PBS Kids that weren't Arthur. So a lot of those I watched along with Arthur as a kid. Lucas watched them, and we have a good spread from like the 90s into the 2000s when we would have been doing that. And we'll be taking a look at older ones as well. And my hope is that we get to cover each show, and we'll do an episode from each show. So that's going to be happening starting in February. Now, I haven't decided yet on what the first episode is going to be about, but we have a lot to choose from. So I'm going to be, narrowing it down. And what I'm going to be asking from our patrons is, once we figure out what show we're doing, for episode recommendations. Now, only from our patrons. I'm going to be asking the question over on our private Discord. So if you send me emails asking us to do this thing and you're not a patron, unfortunately, I'm not going to be heeding those. Now, you can change that, of course, by becoming a patron over at patreon.com/Elwood City Limits. And this, I'm also not going to change. I believe that we should be a pay what you want. So if you just want to pay $1 a month and get access to this new show, you absolutely can. We're not going to do the tiered thing. We're not going to, make you pay $5 for an extra show. I'm no shade to that, but I really, as much as I'm saying I want to rely more on Patreon, I also don't want to ask more of you than I think that you should be asked. Because I and Lucas started doing this because we wanted to, and we keep doing it because it's fun. And I don't want money to be the sole motivator. It is going to be a motivator, that's no doubt. But I also want to leave it up to you what you feel that we're worth. If it's $1, that's great. Like, that's $1 more than I have now. And if it's more than that, it's really humbling to see the amounts that have been donated to us throughout the years. So that's what's going to happen. Starting in February, we have a new, and I don't have a name for it yet either, so I might be workshopping that around in our private ECL Discord as well. And if you want to get in that Discord, if you want to get access to this brand new show and all these other announcements that we look to you to help us decide, patreon.com/ElwoodCityLimits. It takes as little as $1 a month. And if you want to pay any more, if you feel that we have given you entertainment worthy of more than that, then you can go right ahead. But you're the boss here, so I'm leaving it up to you. So that's going to be starting in February. It's exciting. I have a lot more time to edit and record podcasts, and that's what I want to do. Maybe even more so than being a writer, I want to keep podcasting. This is the most fun I've had doing anything in the last several years. It's definitely been more fun than a real job, quote unquote, a real job. And you guys are definitely better than any boss that I'll ever have. So I'd much rather answer to you than anybody else. So one more time, that's patreon.com/ElwoodCityLimits. And thank you. Thank you very much. Without taking the step into Patreon and proving that there is something of an audience out there for us, I wouldn't be doing this. So thank you. That's what you can expect from us going forward. And of course, once we make our way through the PBS Kids shows, we'll probably be going back to, well, there are a few people who do want to see us do Canadian kids shows. And I promise those types of shows are going to be a lot of fun to record. In fact, Lucas and I have been talking. This is not this. I'm just letting you know right now. This is unofficial. We're not necessarily doing this. We've been talking about another show that we could potentially do if we ever end up finishing Elwood City Limits. So we will see about that. So again, thank you very much. And I'm really excited for this new chapter of ECL. And I hope that you'll join us too. And if you want to keep listening for free, please do. That's always appreciated. Yeah. Thank you again. So big life changes. All right. So that's what's going to be happening. I wanted to make sure that you guys got in on the ground floor and knew everything at basically the same time. Of course, if you're a patron, you knew this a little earlier. Okay. So we're going to take a quick break here. A little bit of an ad break. And then we are going to come back. It's going to be me and Christine Lascote from the most recent episode of Elwood City Limits. We're going to be talking about a video visit from Marc Brown, which you can find this 11-minute video on YouTube. And we are going to be talking about it with each other. And I'm really excited to see what Christine thinks. And I hope that you'll join us in just a moment after this. Support for Elwood City Limits is really easy. First of all, you can visit us and follow us on social media. You can go to facebook.com/Elwood City Limits. On Twitter, you can follow us at ECL Podcast. We're also on Tumblr, elwoodcitylimits.tumblr.com. You can also go to our Instagram, Elwood City Limits. Follow us over there too. You can also contribute to us on a monthly basis over at patreon.com/Elwood City Limits. We have corresponding rewards for when we hit certain levels of patronage. So please, if you feel like you would like to donate financially to us, you're under no obligation to, but if you want to, patreon.com/Elwood City Limits. Also, if you want to have a little bit of ECL on your person, go to teespring.com/stores/Elwood-City-Limits-store. Make a little rhyme out of it. You can go over there and get a t-shirt, a hoodie, or a tank top with the Elwood City Limits logo on it. And we've got even more designs coming in real soon. So make sure to check back there. Finally, share this podcast with a friend who likes animation, who likes Arthur, or who just likes having fun. Sharing us on social media, sharing us with people you know, and sending in your emails to elwoodcitylimits@gmail.com. All are fantastic ways to support us, and we thank you very, very much. Now, let's get back to the show. Hey, everybody. Back once again after that little break there. Thanks a lot for joining us. It's a little bit of an unusual episode of Elwood City Limits because I think this might be the first time... Actually, I don't want to say that because I feel like I'll be immediately contradicted that we've had a guest on for 2 weeks in a row. Once again, joining us is Christine Lascote.
Hello, welcome back to me. I'm welcoming myself back.
Well, I feel very welcome after that. Christine, it's great to have you back again. Christine, you're a podcaster, you're a writer,
yes,
and you're a lifelong Arthur fan.
Lifelong, baby. Lifelong.
And so I knew that I wanted to do something with this when I found it just completely randomly on YouTube, and thankfully I think I found the right person to talk about this with. So I think you might have said that you've seen this video entitled "A Video Visit from Marc Brown" before.
I have. So I said before when I was on the show that I worked at my local library when I was a teenager, and we would play Arthur videos because I worked in the children's section of the library. And on one of the VHS tapes was this A Visit from Marc Brown video.
Okay.
I cannot remember which one it was for the life of me, but that is my origin story with this video.
So the idea behind it, I'm guessing, is that they would play this video for kids. It almost seems like something you would put on in like maybe a classroom setting or something.
Probably, I would assume so.
Okay, because I saw some of the YouTube videos on this video uploaded by stupid_robot_pilot on YouTube that they watched it in class, or they were just kind of saw it through their teacher or something like that.
Mm-hmm. So
yeah.
Yeah, definitely something that we put on, and it was one of the ones that I liked to put on the most because it was Arthur related, so I just needed all the Arthur in my life.
Of course. All right, so we're gonna take a look at this right here. I mean, it is what it is. The entire idea is that it's live action, and we're taking a bit of not so much a tour of Marc Brown's house, but kind of his creative space within his house. Mm-hmm. So I found that pretty interesting. I mean, first of all, Marc Brown kind of greets us outside by his picket fence. A very unassuming fellow is Marc Brown.
Seems that way for sure. Also very welcoming.
Yeah, he's always come across to me as very like soft-spoken and kind. This would have been right. It seems like it's right around the time that the first season would have aired, so he probably would have been. I'm just looking like, and as of 2020, he's 73 years old, so he probably would have been in like his late 40s, early 50s.
Yeah.
So yeah, he's got this. He's got a baseball hat on, and you were kind of talking a little bit about the derby sweater.
Yes.
was mystifying you a little bit,
and it still is because I don't know the origin story of what derby is. But later on in the video, he talks about things that he hides in his books, which I'm sure we'll get to. But one of the things that he hides in his books is also derby. So now I feel like the mystery is so wide. I don't know what Marc Brown's connection is to derby, but now I feel like it's like a lost thing. Like it's one of the mysteries that I must solve.
Well, yeah, and I have a feeling that maybe one of our listeners has a bit of an idea about what that might be. Marc Brown takes us into his house, and we get a little bit of a tour of. There's a couple of like fireside shots of him talking about his early life growing up in Erie, Pennsylvania, which he based a lot of Arthur on his own childhood experiences of like Mr. Ratburn was one of his teachers when he was growing up. Erie, Pennsylvania is meant to be like Elwood City. He even had a Grandma Thora.
Oh, and that was so cute when he talks about his Grandma Thora a few times in the video, and it like. I was just picturing like cartoon Grandma Thora every time he talked about her. So at one point when he talks about her pulling out her false teeth to tell scary stories, I imagined our cartoon Grandma Thora.
It's a very vivid picture. Although Grandma Thora didn't, I don't. Oh, she does that. Yeah, she does have false teeth.
She
actually,
does.
now that I think about it. Just not much of a plot point to those false teeth become. At a couple points in the video, as you kind of mentioned before, he refers back to his kids who are kind of varying ages. He has, I want to say it's 2 sons and a daughter.
Yes, 2 sons and a daughter: Tolan, Tucker, and Eliza.
And Eliza is the youngest of them all. He takes us up to his seems to be like his 3rd floor, maybe his attic of his house, which is where he kind of has the Arthur creative studio. And this is it doesn't really have as much to do with the TV show. It's all about him creating the books. So he's writing and he's illustrating it as well. I am in love with his home setup. He's got this big open room with all of his supplies on this giant table. He's got windows to a view. It looks like the ultimate home office setup. It looks great.
Giant bookcase with all of his like Arthur memorabilia like scattered in there. So cool. It must be such a fun place to create. Like I can definitely see like the wholesomeness of creating in that space.
And he kind of takes us through through various parts. So you see him first. He's penciling in a sketch of Arthur, which a lot of illustrators are able to kind of bang those out really quickly. I know that he himself has done like I remember between Arthur episodes they would do like the tutorials of how to draw Arthur and how to draw DW, and he can just do it super fast. I'm always impressed with how fast illustrators can just bang out a sketch of a character they've done like a million times.
Have you tried to draw Arthur and DW from his like a video from Marc Brown things?
I don't think I ever did. I should absolutely try and do that. I was just like, oh yeah, that like I've seen it, but I never tried it for myself.
Oh, you know what you should do? You and Lucas should both draw it and put it on Twitter, not say who did it, and have everybody like vote who did it better.
Ooh, that's a good idea. I'm stealing that one. And we should invite some other guests to do that as well.
Oh, absolutely.
I'll see if I can get this going. That sounds like a fun idea. So yeah, he does kind of the pencil sketch, and he's got the table with the light from below where he kind of does the inking, which is where he takes a pencil sketch and then he this I found really interesting because I used to be into illustration when I was much younger. He inks it over, and that'll be the one he sends to the publisher. And when he's inking, he can make improvements on the pencil sketch.
Mm-hmm. And this, I've watched my husband's an animator, so I've watched him toil over light boxes in the past.
That's very interesting. Somebody who's a lifelong fan of Arthur marries an animator.
I met my husband because of a cartoon quote, because of Futurama. He had a quote from Futurama on like his online, and I saw it. And
Well, which quote was it?
As a head without a body, I envy the dead.
That's a nice one. It's a deep pull, and I can see how that can win somebody. And yeah, kind of taking us through a bit more, and eventually he puts the watercolors in. Always really like how animated and bright, how vivacious Marc Brown's illustrations are. They're always very like active, and they seem very like positive.
Yes.
And they're all like they're smiling or they've got their mouths open, and it's a very inviting type of illustration to read as a kid.
And he's always got a lot of details too. Like you could stare at any Marc Brown illustration and find 12 things in the background that unless you were looking really, really hard, you might not notice, but they're like every aspect of it is so meticulously drawn and put in. It's really nice. I wrote a note that I would watch an entire half-hour video of just him drawing, like call it The Joy of Arthur.
Yeah. Oh, that would be great. I would love it. The Joy of Arthur.
It's just relaxing.
Yeah, very much so. And it's just nice to see a professional do their work well.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
There's a point he made here because I mentioned that a lot of Arthur comes from Marc Brown's life as a kid, but then he also mentions that some of the situations came from things that his own kids kind of got up to when they were young. And he's like, the story of Arthur's tooth happened with one of my sons. And that led me to ask. So, like, in a way, you could say that Arthur is kind of the author stand-in for Marc Brown, if there is one. But do you think, in a way, Dad Reed is the Marc Brown insert character?
I mean, I think at some point he had to be. He had to turn into, like, it's almost like, is Marc Brown, like, a compilation of both of them?
Yeah. Like, and kind of echoing in that way.
Yeah, because, I mean, obviously his experiences as a kid are, his first, even if you look at Marc Brown, he looks a little bit like this iteration of Arthur that we're used to seeing on the cartoon, not the original one. The original one looks a little bit more like an aardvark, but they even look very similar. So it's almost like I wonder if he's thinking of his kids, and then he's also thinking, well, wait, what did my dad say? What would I say? And it becomes like an amalgam of all of it.
Mm-hmm. It's at this point, like the back half of the video is essentially Marc Brown taking us through kind of abbreviated recap of the Arthur Writes a Story episode, which, first of all, I'm all for because we get to see some of that wonderful character design and coloring from the first season, which,
yes.
I mean, again, it's showing my age, and I feel like listen, and if you've listened to the show, I absolutely adore the first season, and it's because it was part of my childhood. But also, I just feel like there's a lot of character to the more, I suppose, rougher in a way.
Yeah.
But the more original drawings of that, and of course,
absolutely.
not meaning to negatively compare it to the season we're on or the seasons that got away from traditional animation. There's just something there. There's a lot of life. There's a lot of character. There's a lot of spirit in watching these, and I haven't watched them since we watched them for the show, which would have been 3.5 years ago. So it's really, it really just puts me in a positive mood to watch an old episode like this.
Anytime I watch an old episode of Arthur, and I've been trying to put on a lot of them for my daughter, and anytime they make me so happy. They almost feel more vibrant than the ones that are out now. There's just, like you said, there's just a livelihood to them, a lifelikeness, fun, and even though they're a little rough, they're just they're comforting in a way. And I think it's because it's what you're used to as a kid, and it's that comfort that you seek as a kid, and it's the TV show, and you still feel that now as an adult watching it so many years later.
Right. Yeah, so, and it literally is like, it'll cut from like Marc Brown reading the Arthur Writes a Story book to a clip from the episode, and it's an interesting way to kind of re-experience it. And speaking of re-experiencing it, if you want to listen to mine and Lucas's long-form thoughts on Arthur Writes a Story, that's all the way back in season 1. In fact, the audio quality might sound better because we were in a professional radio studio at the time. But this kind of makes me wonder, Christine, you have 2 different podcasts. Do you ever listen back to your older episodes, like, for fun?
Some of them. Sometimes I avoid it at all costs because of how bad audio quality was. It's also, I think, good because it's nice to go back and see how you've grown as a person and how you've grown as a podcaster and how your style has evolved over time. So yeah, sometimes, but for the most part, I cringe a lot when I go back and listen to old episodes.
Like, I don't mean to toot the podcast horn or anything. I just, every once in a while, I'll be like, I kind of want to watch that Arthur episode again. Actually, I kind of want to hear what I had to say about it, and me and Lucas. But that's not so much me being like, oh, my opinion's amazing. It's like my memory is famously terrible, so I'm like, I don't remember what I said. So let me just see if I agree with myself from like 2 or 3 years ago.
I mean, I just finished listening to all of your old episodes, and I think you guys are all still in point. I don't see anything different from then to now.
Yeah, so this was a video put on by the Trumpet Club, because that's pretty much the end of the little video here. It's only about 10 minutes long. I'm not super familiar with the Trumpet Club. I'm actually just looking them up right now. Looks to be a publisher, so I guess maybe an Arthur publisher,
probably,
of the time. So I mean, I think we both feel pretty positive about this whole thing, and that's what I love about these kind of Arthur ephemera that have comprised. If you listen to our previous episodes of ECL Presents, and it's all about like weird Arthur content that we've found that kind of doesn't categorize under the main show, and it's always kind of fun to visit in its own way. This was very, the ones before have been kind of like, oh, this is strange, this is weird, or like this is off the wall. This is comforting. This is like putting on a blanket. This is really very like cozy. And then
he does at one point, he gives advice to like kids who want to grow up and be authors and kids who want to grow up and be illustrators. And I mean, he gives the most wholesome advice and the most comforting advice, like just like that a dad would give. Like, well, if you want to be an author, you read a lot of books, write down stuff in your journal. And I'm like, man, that's the kind of advice that like 36-year-old Christine still needs to hear about. Like, when you have a goal that you want to do, here's the simple advice that you can do and you're going to be successful, or you could be successful.
Mm-hmm. And of course, I'm like, maybe I should just put the energy out into the universe I think Lucas is a big believer in that. I would love to interview Marc Brown someday for the podcast. I think that's the biggest get that we can hope for.
Have you reached out to his people?
I never have. That's on me. I kind of did one a few years ago of like for the voice actors and stuff like that. But I should. I get a little shy about that. But,
no, definitely do it.
I think. Well, you know what, Christine? Maybe I will since you've made the suggestion, and we'll see where it goes from there. So yeah, this was just kind of fun to take a look at, and so Christine. Thank you very much for viewing this with me. It was great to have you on again.
Absolutely, 100%.
And of course, if anybody hasn't listened to your episode yet, can you please let everybody know where they can find you?
You can find me on Twitter at ChrissyMarie47. You can listen to my podcast about Heart of Dixie. It's called Long Live the Heart. And you can find that on Apple Podcasts and on Spotify and on Libsyn. Or if you want to listen to me talk about TV couples, we host The Shipping Room. And that is on pretty much everywhere where you can download your podcasts.
All right, Christine, thanks again. It was great to hear from you, and hopefully it won't be too long till we hear from you again.
Absolutely. Anytime. Absolutely anytime.
And you recently tweeted out about if somebody had seen a Rachel Bilson TV show. Unfortunately, I hadn't. I was like, oh, there's my shot to be on The Shipping Room or on one of your podcasts. Hopefully we can find the way in for me or for Lucas one day.
Oh, absolutely. I will come up with something.
Excellent. All right, my name is Will Young. That's the end of Elwood City Limits for this week. Coming up next week, Lucas and I are going to be back at it. Once again, if you are not aware, our next episodes are Arthur Weighs In and The Law of the Jungle Gym, which I believe are Christine approved.
They are approved.
All right.
They're good ones.
So we will see you then. My name's Will Young, and for Christine Lascote.
Bye, guys.
We'll see you next time.